We're happy to be joined by Senator Chap Petersen, also here to talk about transportation. Then we'll check on some other issues. But Senator, thanks so much for giving us the time this
Thank you for having me here.
It looks as though after years of inaction, we're finally ready to see a major transportation bill move forward in both chambers.
Well, it looks that way. The Senate Finance Committee has reported out the governor's bond bill. It's a $4 billion bond package, and we need to go through the details. To be honest, it's a pretty complicated bill, and I'll be looking at it over the next 72 hours, reading the bill, talking to some of the experts in the field, and trying to figure out exactly what it does and what we can potentially do to make it better. But by and large, I think you are going to see something coming out of the Assembly this year.
We spoke with Senator McWaters earlier about the effect of the transportation issue in the Hampton Roads area. You're from another one of the most congested areas in the Commonwealth. How do things look in Northern Virginia?
Well, I live in the central Fairfax region, Fairfax City, town of Vienna, and all the neighborhoods in between. And it's a very congested area, very densely populated, and it's had the same road network really dating back to the 1950s. So there's a lot of improvements that need to be made. The last expansion we had of the metro system dates back to 1986. And so things are a little bit worn out, and we need to make some steps forward.
Was a proposal, I think, that Senator McWaters carried that would have allowed diversion of some sales tax revenues for both Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia. Your position on that?
Well, first of all, the bill got killed in committee, so my position's a little bit moot at this point. But the problem with that is that essentially what you're doing is you're taking that money out of the general fund. And when you take money out of the general fund, and I'm all for more money for Northern Virginia, but the problem is that essentially you're taking it out of K through 12 education, public safety, every other general fund priority that we have. And, you know, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. And my biggest problem with transportation, and it's the problem with the governor's bill, and the governor's not solving it, is you need to have a dedicated stream of revenue consistent from year to year that you can use to pay down your debt, that you can use to take on new projects and pay for maintenance. And unfortunately, this bill doesn't create that, and that's a major flaw.
I was going to say, along those lines, you know, there have been a lot of folks critical of the bill, a lot of them Democrats, because it's essentially borrowing money.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel like we're borrowing tactics from Washington, D.C., where we're issuing debt, we're spending money, and we're not really thinking about how we're going to pay for it. Now, I know there's reasons to do it now. Construction costs are low, borrowing rates are low, so there are advantages in taking the projects on now. And to be honest, it's always tough to say no to a bill like this in an election year. There's a lot of projects that have been sitting, waiting around for years, and we have a chance to get them done. But this is not a comprehensive answer. And again, I'm going to look at it over the weekend and see if there's some things we can do to make it better. But at the end of the day, I don't see it bringing any new actual revenues to the table. So it wouldn't qualify for profiles and courage as a piece of legislation, but at the same token, it is going to get some things done in my area.
Well, based on where this conversation's gone, I hope this doesn't sound like a complete non sequitur, but I have to ask, is this $4 billion plan going to be enough?
You know, again, probably not, because what we're basically doing is taking 10 years of ability to borrow money and doing it all in the first couple of years. So really what we're doing is we're accelerating spending. And I analogize it to the story of the prodigal son from the Bible, where the prodigal son took all his inheritance and spent it right away, and then he had to go live in a in a pigsty. So hopefully we're not going to end up in a pigsty. But the bottom line is we're spending everything at the front end, and we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do at the back end.
I want to talk about some other measures that I think are especially significant to you. I believe you have a few measures that have been introduced trying to curb the number of foreclosures.
That's right. We suffer in this state from something that I call drive-by foreclosures. And a drive-by foreclosure happens when somebody basically acquires a mortgage, decides that they're going to foreclose on it, the property's in default, they send a foreclosure notice, it happens within a 14-day window, they end up taking the title, the person that's foreclosed upon has no opportunity to cure, oftentimes the paperwork is very shoddy, sometimes it can even be fabricated, and the upshot of the whole process is that the property is foreclosed on, the family's put out in the street, and oftentimes they're in a position where they could cure that foreclosure, or their documents used or fabricated. And again, the whole process is very, very shady.
As I understand it, a lot of states are in a similar place, that they have systems that are not too different from what Virginia
Right.
has currently.
Well, this is a whole an after effect of what we call the mortgage-backed securities issue from the last decade, where you had people going around selling mortgage-backed securities and people were buying and selling them. But at the end of the day, a mortgage is an actual note under Virginia law, and you need to produce that in order to foreclose on a property. And so you had people that would buy mortgage-backed securities, and so they were, quote, the owners of the debt without ever actually having their hands on the debt. And so in some cases they've gone back and produced or fabricated the documents in order to foreclose, and the whole thing is very troubling. And my bill is going to try and bring some transparency and some honesty to the process.
Have you got support from business interests on this side?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I have a lot of great friends in the banking community, but the banking community never comes forward voluntarily to ask to be regulated. So the bottom line is no, they're opposing these bills. And I understand that, but I look at it this way. Mortgage-backed securities almost took down this economy a couple years ago. It's entirely appropriate for the state to put in minimum protections for our homeowners when we do have a foreclosure process.
I think you also had a measure that had to do with the retirement system in some instances.
I do. I had a measure that specifically pertains to Fairfax City, but it's important because what it does is it says that firefighters and police, that they can retire at an earlier age and still keep their full retirement. You know, a firefighter and a policeman is in a little different position than your ordinary state employee. They're not somebody who at the age of 60 or 62 ought to be running into a burning building or chasing down a perpetrator on a city street. You know, but what I wanted to do is make sure that they could serve their time and retire on their full pension, you know, at an age that's reasonable and consistent with their contemporaries around the country.
Broadening it out to look at the entire Virginia retirement system, the Senate, I believe, has decided not to require on its side that 5% contribution by state employees.
Right, and we talked a lot about that, and I've had a lot of input from back home, and basically our position is, you know, we made a deal with our state employees, and that is if you were hired before July 1, 2010, we were going to pay your share of your retirement. And we pay salaries that are below the market rate. I mean, you got a lot of folks, you know, watching in the Richmond area. They're state employees, many of them. They know that. We know that. And part of the bargain with them was we were going to pick up the share of their retirement and have a strong retirement system. And I think to change the rules halfway through the game is unfair to those state employees. And, you know, to be honest, our systems, it does need some help. The actuarial numbers don't match up as well as they should. But I think it's something that we can solve with better fiscal discipline rather than just going back and changing the rules.
What do you think about proposals to provide salary increases that would essentially equal that contribution to the system?
You know, I raised this issue at a town hall, and again, what people told me was when you get that salary increase and you back out the taxes and you back out the Social Security, it doesn't really match up. Again, they're comfortable with the current system. And I'm not saying the current system is infallible. And in fact, new employees are not going to be under that system. But while we do have people that have been in it and have played by the rules, I don't want to change the rules.
This is a provision that was defeated, but there was a proposal to allow state employees to invest money in a 401k instead of in the traditional pension system. Again, that was defeated, but I think even even folks who opposed the bill indicated that they'd welcome some study.
Yeah, listen, a VRS, it's a living, breathing organism. I mean, we borrowed from it last year, and the contributions that we make and the method of those contributions are always going to be subject to amendments and fine-tuning. And it may well be, you know, at a later time. As I said, we made a material change last year in terms of the new employees, and it may well be at a later time we want to look at a different type of plan, but we're not going to do it this year.
Want to look at ABC. That's a favorite measure of the governor,
Right.
trying to privatize the ABC system. Looks like it's not going anywhere in the House or the Senate this year,
Right.
but chances are it's going to come back.
I guess so. I mean, it didn't seem like anyone was too enthusiastic to take it to a vote. The governor put a bill in the Senate, and Senator Obenshain had decided to carry it. And basically our position in the Senate was, look, we're not going to go out on this on a limb or do this unilaterally. You need to have a House bill, and that House bill needs to pass committee and pass the floor, and then we'll take it up in the Senate. And the bottom line was the Speaker of the House, I guess, just didn't want to do that, and so the bill died.
Yeah. Senator Chap Petersen, thanks so much for being with us this afternoon from Fairfax City. Really enjoyed your presence on the program.
Great.
That's Capital Events for this week. We thank you for joining us on the program and invite you to be back here next week.